Story 1. Okay, everyone, before we begin, why don't we go around the room and tell us a little about yourselves? Story 2. My husband persuaded me to go to a party at a friend's house. When we arrived, our friend hugged me and said, "Wow, you smell really good." Seconds later, everyone said, "I want to smell." And I was surrounded by people sniffing me as soon as I walked into the party. I wanted to die. It was not even perfume, it was my hair oil. If I could afford therapy, this would definitely come up. Story 3. I sat at the back of the Spanish class when the teacher asked a question. Being the little nerd I was in school, my hand shot up. The teacher looked over, pointed at me, and said, "Sí, señorita." I was a feminine, underdeveloped 15-year-old boy, late in puberty, with longer than usual hair. After that, I stopped answering any teacher's questions willingly. Story 4. I had a high school buddy who was sworn to silence with most people, even teachers, but he would talk to a select few students. He was the funniest person I have ever met. He said he had gone whole years without saying a word to his teachers. Update: wow, thanks for the upvotes and responses. I did not think this would get attention. We would get on Xbox and play with him, and he would be the loudest, smack-talking everyone. He was a really cool guy. I wish I had kept in touch. Story 5. Putting a year's worth of confidence into a job interview, only to be the quiet one after you get the job. That's anxiety, dude. Story 6. While going to college, I interned for the state's largest business development corporation. In a meeting with the executive team, the top executive was making friendly conversation before we started and asked me what classes I was taking. To set the scene, I was just the temporary note-taker. I never expected anyone to notice me, let alone put me on the spot in front of a long table of successful professionals. I blacked out. My brain went blank. I mumbled a few inaudible grunts and ums, then had no choice but to admit I could not remember. I wanted to die. The looks of confusion and the awkward silence as they switched topics still haunt me at night. Story 7. I went to a party. A man I had never met walked up to me, shook my hand, and said hello. He asked, "What is your name? Where were you born? Where will you die? What is in between?" He did not let go of my hand. I froze and had no idea what to say. Story 8. I was in elementary school and took a bus home every day. I missed my stop and was so shy and quiet that the bus driver did not hear me. He continued on to pick up high school students and did not notice I was still on the bus. The high school students were very kind. They alerted the bus driver and he took me home. My mom was very upset by the time I arrived. Story 9. I had a mandatory speech class when I was a freshman in college. I would give the speech, then go back to my dorm and throw up. It really frightened my roommate, whom I barely spoke to. There were 5 speeches that semester. It was a nightmare. Story 10. I am a bit shy when I first meet people, so after they get to know me, I often hear, "When I first met you, I thought you were such a bitch." Cool. Story 11. When I enter a new place for the first time, whether a shop, a bar, or a restaurant, I always play the gentleman and hold the door open for my partner, so she can assess the area before I sheepishly shuffle in behind her. Story 12. You go to a crowded party with a friend who insisted you come, but then they disappear. Story 13. I was in a group therapy session as a kid, maybe 14. I really had to go to the bathroom, but we weren't allowed to during the session. I was curled up in the center of the room, not emotional, just sitting and hugging my knees because all the spots on the couch were taken. A girl had just finished telling a story of her abuse. She was crying, and there was a respectful silence that fills the room when you want to be supportive but any comment would seem inconsiderate. Into that yawning silence, I farted. I knew it was coming. I'd been staving off the gurgling in my stomach for some time and had even broken into a sweat trying to delay the inevitable. But it was no use. I tried to shift my weight to muffle the sound. I failed. It was neither silent nor deadly. It shattered the silence like a sledgehammer against a Christmas ornament. Another moment of silence followed, one of disbelief. Then a kid yelled at the top of their lungs, "Jen farted." The entire room collapsed into helpless laughter while I turned to stone and felt like I died on the spot. Story 14. In my high school Spanish class, a student screamed, "Do you ever talk?" at me in front of the entire class. It was very embarrassing at the time, but hilarious to look back on. For those curious, I said nothing in response. If only I could go back in time. Story 15. I went to a summer camp at a history museum when I was in 4th grade. On the second day, they sprung on us that we would have to create a short play about a notable figure of our choice. I was already terrified, and I made it worse by choosing Kai Lewin, the man who invented paper. The play ended up being a 30-second monologue, basically a condensed biography, and I wore musty silk robes. After I slunk back to my seat, I realized that everyone else performed actual plays with dialogue and plot. I was so embarrassed. Story 16. When you speak, people may say things like, "Oh, I did not know you could speak," or "This is the first time I hear you speak." Story 17. Starts college. Does not make friends. Lockdown. Shit is fucked. Story 18. I don't talk much in class and interact with only a few people. Some of my classmates thought I hated them and cropped me out of their end-of-year class photos, which they posted on Instagram. I don't care about their posts, but I felt really hurt that they cropped me out. Story 19. I was at a friend's house. His parents used to scare me. His father had a thick Asian accent, and because I was nervous, I guess I wasn't paying attention. I didn't realize he was directly asking how I was, and I just stood there awkwardly. I thought he was speaking to his son in Cantonese. I still think about this. I never corrected my boss when she mixed up my name on the first day. I had already introduced myself to some people by my real name. The other people my boss introduced me to called me by a different name. I felt too shy to correct her in front of the group. It led to more awkward conversations, as the two names were completely different. Story 20. I was told to lower my voice and shut up as a child, and as a teenager I was told to speak up for myself and answer when spoken to. As a shy girl, I only spoke when my friends spoke. I did not go to my teacher when I accidentally smashed my thumb with a hammer during a class project. Trying to be quiet and not disturb anyone, I realized no one had noticed I had injured my thumb. After nearly fainting at the sight of my blood, I walked to the teacher so I would not bother anyone else and asked if she had a first aid kit. She said, "Of course. Why? Did you hurt yourself?" I showed her my thumb, the skin torn and bleeding, and said, "Kind of." She was shocked I had not screamed or said anything for 10 minutes and immediately went to get the first aid kit to dress my injury. She knew I was quiet and shy, although it surprised her to see the extent of it. I realized I needed help and had to ask because my small personal first aid kit was only for paper cuts and scrapes. In short, I was too shy to draw attention to my pain and had to gather the courage and take a breath to ask for assistance. Thank you, everyone. I did not expect so much attention. I am glad many of you found this relatable and were able to sympathize. Story 21. My shy buddy hated ordering coffee at the Starbucks in the Barnes and Noble bookstore. The baristas would not accept her order or take her money until they asked about 6 questions first. She couldn't stand it. Her. I'd like a medium coffee. Barista, do you want light roast or dark roast? We don't have a medium. We have tall. Okay? Do you want room for cream? What's your name? Are you a member of the bookstore club? Are you a member of the Starbucks rewards program? I might be misremembering, but at least once she panicked and walked away in the middle of the questioning. Story 22. By far, my worst experience was living with a roommate. I was not able to talk to them, and I thought they hated me. Story 23. When graduating basic training, I had to walk across the stage, stop at the microphone, execute a left-face turn, and state my name into the microphone, with a short pause between my first and last names as a cue for the next row of recruits to walk up. I completely fucked it up in front of everyone. I went to shake my drill sergeant's hand as a formality of the ceremony, and he whispered to me, "Way to fuck that up in front of everyone, dipshit. Fuck off back to your seat." I fucking hate public speaking. Story 24. Someone took my order from the shelf at the online order station at Chipotle, and I waited 45 minutes after the scheduled pickup time before saying anything because I did not want to be rude. It is not the worst thing to happen to me, but it is the reason I stopped going to Chipotle. Story 25. I hate video calls. I was going to drive 1.5 hours to my college to talk to a professor in person instead of just video calling to follow up on something. Story 26. I had to explain our project in a seminar when the person responsible did not show up, and I was very nervous. Story 27. I fucking hate the first day of every class when the teacher makes us do the icebreaker and go around the room having everyone say a fun fact about themselves. Story 28. The worst one was probably when someone said, "Why do you not talk?" I just shrugged, but they did not get the joke and actually thought I was mute. Story 29. I was having coffee with a friend one day. We had been to the gym, so I thought I looked pretty disheveled. But a man came up and slid me a piece of paper with his number. He said he had seen me while driving by, thought I was beautiful, and had to stop and say hello. I was so caught off guard and naturally awkward around strangers that the only thing I could blurt out was, "If you think I'm cute now, you should see me when I've bathed." He walked away. My friend laughed. I was embarrassed for days. Story 30. I am not shy. I only speak when necessary. I tell new people that I am low energy and usually mellow. There is nothing wrong with not having the energy of a 10-year-old who drank 3 Red Bull energy drinks. People often take what I say more seriously than what others say. People are different in that regard. The worst experiences are when people talk about you right next to you, assuming you do not have a backbone. Story 31. I started high school after being cooped up at home for 6 months while recovering from spine surgery for scoliosis. I was very unsocialized that September and had to force myself to talk to people I did not know. I set small daily goals until I got used to it again. It was painful. I imagine much of the world will feel this way when isolation ends, though. Story 32. I was very shy when I was little. My mother would constantly tell me that people thought I was rude for hiding behind her and not speaking. It made it 1,000 times worse, because I assumed everyone thought I was a terrible person and hated me. Story 33. When I have to speak in front of my class, I speak loudly enough, but I don't like looking at the audience. I'm very shy in person, though I'm not shy online or with my friends. Story 34. In middle school, I didn't have any friends in my scheduled lunch period, so I had to find some people I sort of knew to sit with. It went well for a while until one girl started being extremely rude. She would randomly pick apart the way I looked to someone else at the table, and I would keep my head down, eat, and pretend I hadn't heard her. I'm a decent-looking female, but it really did a number on my self-esteem. Fuck you, Jana. Story 35. My birthday falls during school vacation, and I had never failed a subject, so I never celebrated with my class. In my senior year of college, we had vacation classes to prepare for the board examinations, a joint session of 2 sections. Our class president decided to surprise me. I was sitting in the front in my designated seat when she announced it and the whole room sang happy birthday. I sank into my chair, wishing the ground would swallow me. Story 36. Best man speech in front of more than 100 people. I knew it was coming almost a year in advance and agonized over it the whole time. I rehearsed it in my head at least 1,000 times. It was sheer terror when I went up to give it. In the end, I did pretty well. I received many genuine compliments. The experience itself was not the worst. It was the time leading up to it that was the hardest. Story 37. I was alone on graduation day, all dressed up. Thankfully, my dad was there, so it was bearable. Story 38. In college, my professors seemed to love assigning projects that end with class presentations. I told a professor that I hate speaking in front of people because I am shy, awkward, and I stutter when I am nervous. He told me to try my best. The week of the presentation, he sent out an email saying it was Brenna's favorite part. Gee, thanks. Story 39. I'm not really shy anymore because I don't care as much. But when masks were first required, I felt kind of hidden. Later, when I had to go out in public where masks were not required or had to show my face without one, I felt vulnerable for some reason. Story 40. Many of my friends and my girlfriend told me they thought I was weird, annoying, rude, and so on when they first met me because of my poor social skills. It hurts to think about all the relationships I missed because people assume things about me for that reason. Story 41. I decided to be brave at a college picnic for students in the pharmacy program. All the tables were occupied, so I confidently went to a table with a group of people and asked if I could join them. I sat down, but no one spoke to me. I ate as quickly as I could, went home and cried. I was furious with them. Edit. It was a picnic to welcome back students. All the tables were full and I had a plate of food. My options were to join a random group, try to stand while eating, or dump my plate and go home. In retrospect, I should have chosen the third option, but at a minimum, the people I sat with could have made an effort to be polite. Story 42. When I was in 7th grade, I forgot a pencil and did not have the courage to get up and ask for one. My teacher did not have any spare pencils, so he told me to go to another classroom and ask for one. Being a shy, socially awkward teenager, I did not get up and just sat there. He became increasingly loud and aggressive, telling me to get a pencil until I began to cry in front of my classmates. Eventually, he got up, walked me outside, comforted me, and went to fetch a pencil. It was still my worst memory there, but he was a great teacher. Story 43. I was much worse as a child. In 5th or 6th grade, I was bused to a learning center once a week for a gifted program. On my first day, we were supposed to stand up and talk about a painting the class had been discussing. I have always had a very quiet voice, and I still do. On top of that, I was extremely terrified of new environments and of speaking in front of a class. I had barely gotten a word out when the teacher yelled at the top of her lungs that it was not for me. She insisted I speak louder, told me the class was not just for me, and called me selfish. So I tried to finish with my voice shaking, my heart in my throat, fighting back tears so I would not be the quiet kid who cried in front of the class. I'm in my 40s now and not nearly as shy as I was then, but I still remember that feeling clearly. Story 44. You are quiet. You should talk more. You are loud. You should shut the fuck up more. Story 45. First one. In Spanish class when I was 13 on the first day of school, the teacher said in my language, "So, I am tired of you kids being embarrassed to speak in front of each other. So let's get embarrassed properly now, all of us equally." She then started with me because I had a Spanish name. I'm French with Spanish origins, but no one speaks Spanish in my family. Made me pick a piece of paper, and I had to do what was on it. Introduce myself in Spanish, like a rapper in front of everyone. I was shy. I hated rap music. I preferred vintage songs and even classical music. I wasn't popular, and I couldn't even sing a lullaby. I hated that teacher. Second one. I was 11 and on my period. We had to go to the pool for physical education, but my mother refused to let me skip it, even though I had never succeeded with tampons and had only used pads. Periods stop in water, she said, and it worked, but we spent most of our time out of the water, listening to instructions or waiting in line for the diving board. When it was my turn, I got onto the diving board, 6 meters, and stopped because I was a bit scared for about 10 seconds, enough to let everyone see blood on my leg. It was gross for others and embarrassing for me because the entire middle school talked about it for weeks. Story 46. After the September 11th, 2001 attacks, Laura Bush came to my elementary school to meet students for a television show. We were all told we had to ask her a question. I was the only kid in the class who did not ask anything. Truth be told, the questions I thought of had already been asked, and I was more interested in learning about the Secret Service agents. The next day, the whole class and the other 5th grade teachers asked why I did not say anything. For the rest of the year, I was the kid who did not talk to the First Lady. Story 47. The teacher spent 30 minutes harassing me for being too feminine for a guy. I remember crying while everyone else laughed at me. Story 48. The first time I spoke up in class, someone who had been harassing me yelled, "W, that's what you sound like. For the sake of our ears, you should never speak again." Story 49. Opening up to the wrong people when you make a life-changing decision. Story 50. I posted here a second ago but changed my mind. This was worse. In high school biology, we were doing frog dissections. I was placed in a group with a bunch of boys who teased me the whole time. I was the only girl. They made me clean the tray at the end of class. There was a long line because there was one sink in the back of the classroom. Because my group goofed off, I was last in line. The boy in front of me tried to chat me up. I responded tersely because he had a smug look. He kept looking back at me and washed his tray and instruments very slowly. As soon as he finished, the bell rang. Then the teacher said no one could leave until I finished cleaning my tray. She saw the boy in front of me. By the way, she was still punishing me for reasons I did not know. Everyone predictably started yelling at me to hurry. I ended up crying while cleaning as fast as I could. Boys in the back of the room started laughing. I turned to the teacher, face full of tears, and begged her to let the class go. I would stay as long as it took to finish. She crossed her arms and smirked at me. I finished quickly, but I was still sobbing as I left. I was 1 minute late to the next class, but that teacher did not punish me. She saw I was in tears and asked what happened. I was crying too much to make much sense. So she gave me a mini Zen garden to play with outside and told me to take my time to calm down. A week later, my friend told me she had heard girls from my class talking about me and saying it was embarrassing that I cried. She told them to shut up. After that, the biology teacher was nicer to me for the rest of the semester, and I even got an A in the class. She asked me to join the science club in following years. She was the club advisor and always smiled when she saw me. I have no idea what actually happened or why she treated me that way. I did manage to explain what had happened to my next period teacher. That teacher had several decades of seniority, so it is possible she complained to the administration and got the other teacher in trouble, which is why she was nicer. I do not know for sure. Story 51. A child I was babysitting got stuck in the big bowl at a skate park, so I slid in to help him. When I got him out, a group of about 20 children and their parents showed up and came straight over to the bowl where I was standing alone. I took a run and jumped but could not get out. After a few attempts and what felt like 1,000 eyes on me, a woman grabbed my hands, pulled me out, and dropped me face first onto the ground in the middle of the laughing crowd. Story 52. I have crippling social anxiety disorder. You would not believe how many times my family has screamed at me at the grocery store checkout, demanding that I give the money to the cashier even after I told them I could not handle it. I would much rather use the self-checkout, but they make a huge scene saying I must be stupid for not being able to talk to people. Story 53. This is not a single experience but an ongoing one. Shyness keeps me from making friends easily, so I am often forgotten. I am not part of any cliques or groups, never invited to anything, and overlooked by people I consider friends. I have spent time with them on my birthday and at other events, and I am still not part of the group. I do not know if I am off-putting because I am shy, or if they only accept me when I can give them something. I get a smile and a wave, never anything more and often less. I cannot form friendships easily. I shut down in groups larger than 2 because I do not know what to do in a group setting. My worst experience is existing. Story 54. In high school, the entire class would look at me at the same time. My face used to get so red that another kid said it would explode. Story 55. My year 1 teacher shouted at me because I talked like a robot. After I told a teacher I found some homework easy, that teacher told my year 1 teacher I thought I was the best. I was then shouted at in front of everyone and told I was the worst. Story 56. Just every you don't talk much. Do you? Comment ever made. Story 57. One of the popular girls liked me. I was too shy to do anything about it. Story 58. I sat alone in a booth during the end of the school year restaurant party in 7th grade, while 25 other 13-year-olds enjoyed themselves. Story 59. I was very shy in middle school. At my middle school graduation, they called my older sister's name during the ceremony. I was mortified. For perspective, my sister had graduated 7 years earlier. To make it worse, they did it twice while presenting an award I had worked hard for. Story 60. The worst part of being shy is that other people pass you over. Those situations when a teacher, waiter, or employee says something and you answer, but they do not hear you because you did not shout across the room like most people do. I hate that. It seems like many people pretend you are not there if you do not talk much. They forget that you exist. I am sorry, but I do not like being loud. Story 61. Not long ago, A group of girls at my school spread a rumor that I was dating multiple people, and it reached another group I call the gossip group. At lunch, the gossip group, about 5 to 10 girls, approached me and asked questions like, "Who are you dating?" and "Are you a whore?" I ignored them for some time, but they eventually cornered me. Being an anxious person, I had a mental and emotional breakdown right there and then. Not one of my best moments. I should also clarify that one of these girls used to bully me about my race when I was about 5 to 8 years old. Story 62. When I was in 7th grade, I was taking an English test and needed to ask the teacher a question. I tried to be quiet and discreet so I would not attract attention. As I leaned in to whisper, my foot accidentally tapped her foot. She had warned us it was sensitive after surgery and was in a cast at the time. I do not remember how hard I tapped it, but she let out the loudest blood-curdling screech I had ever heard. The whole class turned toward us. I started crying and ran to my desk, holding my ears. I sometimes wonder whether she was truly hurt or whether she simply seized an opportunity to scream at me. She did not like me very much. Story 63. When I was about 8 years old, my teacher asked me a question. I was afraid of public speaking, but I knew the answer and spoke up. She announced to the class that a student had answered out loud and asked them to applaud. I am 24 years old and I still start shaking when a teacher asks me a question. Story 64. The worst thing is that I am so shy. I still have no friends to this day. Story 65. Having to go to crowded places where people do not understand that I feel more comfortable at home makes me angry. Story 66. There was a pep rally at my high school and I sat close to the football players. For some reason, our school decided to do a wave, and when it reached our side, the guy next to me pushed me aside and acted as if I were not sitting there. I was too shy to confront him, so I got up and hid in the locker room. Story 67. After a social event where I had too much to drink and talked a lot, a woman kept asking why I could not always be like that, why I was so quiet and when I would relax. Those questions made her someone I do not want in my friends list. In general, I avoid anyone who makes me feel I am not good enough as I am. Story 68. When, in the rare moments I am comfortable and talkative with people, and they jokingly point out how talkative I am, it makes me not want to speak to them again. Story 69. I was bullied for the way I walk. I became very conscious that people behind me would notice, so I started walking like a duck. Sadly, they still bullied me for it. Story 70. I was a very shy child, though I am not shy anymore, and I grew up without a father. He walked out and became an unspoken subject at home for years. When I was 7, a teacher thought it would be a good idea to ask the class what their father did for a living. I was second to last to be asked and one of only 2 children I knew without a father. This was in the early 1980s, when divorce was not common in my country. The fear of having to speak in class, combined with the embarrassment of not knowing how to answer, tore me to pieces for years. Story 71. I was forced to join the debate team in high school. I was on the cross-examination debate team, where 2-person teams debate one another. We were on the defense for my very first debate, so our role was to oppose the other team's proposal. When I went up to give the first rebuttal, I froze. I literally did not say a word. I just stared at the judge and could not think of what to say. The judge told me to relax, think about what the other team had said, and come up with anything that could be used to oppose them. I still drew a blank. After the allotted time expired, the other team had to question my rebuttal, and the opposing speaker asked only one question. Do you understand our plan? To this day, that is the most embarrassing thing I have ever experienced. Thankfully, subsequent debates went well. Story 72. My former best friend told the barista I was crushing on him while I was standing right there. This is not the reason we no longer speak, but it definitely speaks to her character. Story 73. A girl in my shared kitchen during my first year at university hated silence and would randomly go around the group asking awkward or very personal questions. It felt like having to introduce yourself with a fun fact to a new group of people, but it happened every couple of days. It was awful. Story 74. I am very shy and have severe social anxiety. Almost 2 years ago, my sister passed away, and my family thought it would be a good idea for me to stand up at her service and sing. I made it about 3 words into the song before I stopped, turned around, and ran off. I still dread the thought of it today. Story 75. When I was 5, I went to a park with my babysitter and her daughter. A kid came up and asked if I was Mexican. I did not answer because I did not know her. She assumed I was, brought her friends over, and kept telling them I was Mexican while egging me to speak Spanish. I tried to hide behind my babysitter. It was overwhelming to have a bunch of kids swarm me and demand I speak another language. I did not know how to explain that I am of a different ethnicity. I am Asian. Story 76. Please don't invite me to parties where there aren't any dogs or cats to hang out with. Okay? Story 77. This was bad. I was on my very first date and was hanging out in his bedroom when I needed the toilet. I pulled off 3 sheets, but the remaining piece had a tear. I thought I would look like a vandal if I left it, so I tore another piece. That also tore the remaining piece, so I repeated the process. I ended up using half the roll because I was too awkward to leave a tear in the toilet paper. Story 78. Someone asked me if I did not like to talk. I do not even remember what I answered. I was a 17-year-old who did not know how to hold a conversation. Someone tried to start one and had no patience. Story 79. I just started my studies at a business school. I have oral presentations all the time, and I even have drama classes, which are the worst thing that has ever happened to me. Story 80. When I was 18, I took care of myself physically and with my appearance. At the time, I worked at a smoke shop. The most sold items were cigarillos such as White Owl, Swisher Sweets, and Backwoods, and they were about $1 each. One day we had nothing but $1 bills, around $100 in ones, so when I got my pay, which was $80 for the whole day, I was paid in ones. I left work and stopped by a cash store to get change, at least some $20 bills. For some reason, only women were working that day. The woman who helped me counted the money, which I expected. She then randomly asked, "Why so many $1 bills? Are you a male stripper?" She shouted to her coworkers, "Hey, he's a stripper." At that point, I was extremely nervous, sweating and with watery eyes, but I laughed it off while dying inside. A lot of the women said, "Oh my God, you should dance for us." Or, "How much do you charge for parties?" One woman even asked, "How much for a private lap dance?" I just said no. I work at a smoke shop. That was it. I got my money and left. I never went back. Story 81. My first job interview when I was 16 was a complete car crash. I applied for an apprenticeship and was told my interview was at the start of the very next day. I did not even have a curriculum vitae at the time. I arrived with a freshly written curriculum vitae that I had finished 2 minutes earlier. The interviewer said, "So, tell me about yourself." And I stumbled over my words for 30 seconds before she told me it was clear I had not had a chance to prepare and that we would redo it in a week. A week later, I had actually had time to practice interview skills with a few people. I went in, she started with the same question, and I recited what I had practiced. The interviewer criticized me because I sounded rehearsed. I was not making eye contact, and I did not answer her question well enough. 30 more seconds of stumbling later, she basically told me to leave and that I was not suitable. Honestly, one of the worst experiences of my life. 2 years later, I had an interview for an apprenticeship at an engineering company, and it went much better because the interviewer did not go out of their way to be mean to a teenager. 5 years later, I still do not know how to respond to "tell me about yourself" and cannot properly hold eye contact with anyone, including close friends and family. Story 82. Probably the time back in college, in an auditorium-style class on the first day, the professor used a webcam to focus on each student and project them on the massive screen at the front as that student gave their introduction. That was terrifying for me. I went last and got through it, but the professor didn't take the camera off me. He left it on me while he went on with his first day bullshit. I wanted to die. Just thinking about it again makes my pulse race so hard I can hear it pounding in my head. Story 83. I was in the kitchen at a party. I stepped back to let someone open the fridge and inadvertently ended up stuck in an alcove behind the fridge door. The person who opened it began talking to someone else. so I was silently pinned between the wall and the fridge door for the better part of 10 minutes. Story 84. I used to be very shy in school. The girl I was made to sit next to said I seemed depressed. Story 85. An extroverted asshole at a gathering who overwhelms every conversation by jumping in about the topic before anyone else. Seeking attention. I'm a thinker first, but look who's yakking. Story 86. Usually it is the whole "wow, I did not know you could talk" thing. But fairly recently, a classmate loudly proclaimed that she did not trust quiet, shy people and made direct eye contact with me. Everyone in the class looked at me and laughed. Story 87. When I was 16, I was at a house party with some older people in a situation where my parents would not have approved. Being 16 in a small town and craving excitement, I stayed. Even when the man who owned the house got into a screaming match with his girlfriend because she used his car to pick up drugs, I stayed. She left screaming, and he ranted as she stormed out of the yard. The party, about 8 people including my ex-boyfriend, sat around the fire pit while he ranted about her. I had a habit then of hanging out with people and saying nothing the entire time. I can still be that way now. It flares up worst when people make me uncomfortable. Like at this party. I had said nothing the entire evening. Then he went off about his girlfriend, saying, "She comes in here, running her mouth like she has a right to talk to me like that. Why can't she be like this chick?" He motioned to me, sits there pretty and hasn't said a thing all night, doesn't open her mouth and start trouble, just sits and shuts up. It made me feel so horrible that I have never forgotten it. Even though it made me mad and left me feeling stupid, I was too shy to say anything back. Story 88. People said, "Why are you scared of humans? Hey, look at her trembling hands." And many similar remarks. Story 89. The saddest thing is that the worst stories will never be heard because users are too shy to post them. Story 90. I began to cry and could not stop in the middle of a class debate during my senior year of high school. Story 91. A few years ago, when I started a new job, I attended a training about our strengths and how to use them. At the end, we had to stand up and tell everyone a strength and how we would apply it. When it was my turn, I still had not thought of anything to say and tried to get out of it, but the instructor made me stand and speak. My mind went blank. I stuttered and had no idea what I said, but I made a fool of myself in front of my new boss and coworkers. Fun times. Story 92. I was in 5th grade. The youth choir director at the church I used to attend gave me a solo for the Christmas program. There's a long story about why we stopped attending, but this was the final straw. I didn't want the solo and tried to give it to the person who actually wanted it. Every practice ended in tears because she kept saying, "Sing louder. Stop being so quiet." When the program rolled around, I started bawling the moment the music began. On top of being embarrassed, she took me to the back and started yelling at me so everyone could hear. She said she didn't understand why I hadn't said something if I didn't want to sing. I didn't want to come out of the back at all and stayed there until church was over. Story 93. Not being able to communicate with a college counselor caused me to fail my first 4 years of college. I have only just found the courage to get myself out of the hole I dug. It did not help that the first counselor I reached out to laughed at me when he saw I had taken classes I did not need for my major. I needed help. Story 94. When I was in school, the carpool driver used to pick us up at the school gate and we showed our IDs to the teacher. One morning I missed the car and went home on my own, although I was supposed to return by car. Later, when the driver came with the IDs to collect mine, I had to shout, but my voice failed me. He gathered the other students and left. Eventually everyone cleared out, and I was still sitting at school, pretending a car was coming to pick me up. Story 95. This is an ongoing issue for me. Whenever I feel really shy, I start speaking more quietly than I would like without noticing. Sometimes I can push it away, sometimes I cannot. Even when I try to stay aware of it, it still happens. I'm so sick of people telling me to speak up. Story 96. The worst experience I ever had was in 7th grade, when I accidentally left my computer charger in my locker the night before a test. I arrived at school early to charge my computer before my first period test so I would not get yelled at. I knocked on the teacher's door, but she would not let me in, so I started charging it in the hallway. Later, when she opened the door, I plugged it in at the back of her classroom. She saw it, unplugged it, and said, "I don't know who thinks they're charging this in here, but you're not." After she realized it was me and finished ranting, the class became awkward and quiet, and I accidentally farted. I also had my first anxiety attack when I was 10. I was too shy to ask for help, and I thought I was dying. Sincerely, a loser. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.